All right, let's dive into the fascinating world of interpersonal skills today.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at a blog post called Interpersonal Skills, Why They Matter and How to Improve Them.
Right.
And I think, we often talk about interpersonal skills, but we don't always break down why they matter or how to improve them. So that's exactly what we're doing today.
Yeah, that's such a great point because, I feel like so often people sort of think of these skills as, well, you're either born with them or you're not.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you can improve upon them, I think, is really valuable.
Absolutely. And even just the way the post frames it, right? It talks about them as people skills and essential abilities.
Yeah.
And I think that right there already changes the framing from it's just something you either have or don't have to, oh, this is a skill that I can learn and develop.
Exactly. And that's why the post, I think, is so valuable. It just kind of lays out why these skills are so crucial in all aspects of life.
Absolutely. Just in the intro, it says that ultimately these core people skills affect everything from casual conversations to high-stakes business negotiations.
Yeah. That's a pretty wide range, right?
Huge.
And it just makes you realize, like, no matter what you're doing, whether you're, asking for a raise or just, like, trying to connect with your teenager.
Right.
These skills are at play.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So we've covered the why they matter.
Right.
Let's get into the what, because I think that's what a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah.
What are the specific skills that we should be focusing on?
Mm-hmm.
And the post breaks it down into 6 key skills.
Yeah.
So are you ready to dive into those?
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first one is communication skills, which seems kind of obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's worth breaking down because I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, I talk to people every day, so I'm good at communicating.
Right.
But I think it's so much more than that.
It's about effective communication. It's not just about talking for the sake of talking, but it's really about, like, conveying your message in a way that's clear and concise and easily understood by the other person.
And I think also even being aware of, like, how you're coming across, because sometimes tone, body language, all that plays a role.
Absolutely.
And you may think you're communicating one thing, but the way you're saying it is communicating something totally different.
Right. And then that leads to all kinds of miscommunications and problems.
Oh, for sure. And then I think, too, like the post highlights some really good strategies for communicating effectively.
Yeah.
Like using clear language, maintaining eye contact, and asking follow-up questions, which I think are all really valuable tips.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of forget about the asking follow-up questions piece, which is so important to make sure that, like, you're both on the same page and that the other person understands what you're saying.
Absolutely. Okay, so we got communication down.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is empathy.
Empathy. Yeah.
And I have to admit, this is one that I've sort of struggled with in the past because I used to think of empathy as just feeling sorry for someone, but the post kind of reframed it in a way that was really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Because it talks about it as imagining yourself in their place.
Right.
Which is a totally different way of thinking about it.
It's about stepping outside of your own perspective
and
trying to see the world through someone else's eyes.
And I think that's so crucial for building strong relationships.
Absolutely.
Because if you can understand where someone else is coming from, even if you don't agree with them, you're able to connect with them on a deeper level.
Right. You can have more empathy for them and more compassion for them.
And I think that's something that's really lacking in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a skill that's more important than ever.
Absolutely. It's like the foundation for so many other positive qualities, like, kindness and forgiveness. And all of that kind of stems from being able to empathize with other people.
Totally. Okay, so we got communication, we got empathy.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is active listening, which I think is huge.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, listening is easy. I just sit here and be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so much more than that.
Oh, so much more.
So talk to us about active listening.
So active listening is really about being fully present in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, hearing the words, but actually, like, taking in the information and, like, processing it and engaging with it.
And showing the other person that you're listening.
Yeah, that's so important.
Like, I think about all the times I've been in conversations where I'm, like, half listening.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person can tell.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, are you even listening to me?
Right.
I'm like, yeah. But I'm really not.
Exactly. And that's, like, the opposite of active listening.
Worse.
Active listening is about, like, really making eye contact, nodding your head, asking clarifying questions, and, really just, like, showing the other person that you're interested in what they have to say.
And I think it also, like, in a practical sense, it helps to avoid misunderstandings.
No, absolutely.
Because if you're truly listening to what someone is saying, you're less likely to misinterpret their meaning.
Yeah, and you're more likely to remember it, too.
Right.
Because if you're actively engaged with the information, you're more likely to retain it.
And I think also it just makes the other person feel heard and respected.
Absolutely.
Which is so important.
Yeah, it just builds a stronger connection.
Right.
And a stronger rapport.
Awesome. Okay, so we've covered communication, empathy, active listening.
Mm-hmm.
And now we get to the fun one, conflict resolution.
Oh, yeah, everyone's favorite topic.
Right. Because let's be honest, conflict is inevitable.
It is part of life.
It's going to happen in your personal life, your professional life.
Everywhere you go, there's going to be conflict.
It's just human nature.
Right.
So the question is not how do we avoid conflict, but how do we deal with it effectively?
Exactly. And that's what the post really dives into.
So tell us, what are some of the key takeaways from the post about conflict resolution?
Well, first of all, it's about, not viewing conflict as a bad thing. Because oftentimes, we try to avoid conflict at all costs.
Right.
But actually, conflict can be an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
And it can be a way to strengthen relationships if it's handled in a healthy way.
So it's not about sweeping things under the rug.
No.
It's about addressing the issue head on, but doing so in a way that is
respectful and productive.
And I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, right? Because it's easy to get defensive.
Oh, yeah.
Or to attack the other person.
Totally, especially when you feel like you're being attacked.
Right.
It's natural to want to defend yourself.
And, your fight or flight response kicks in, and all of a sudden you're in an argument.
Exactly.
And you're not even sure how you got there.
Right. But the post emphasizes the importance of staying calm.
Yes.
And really trying to listen to the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
And I think that's so hard.
It is hard.
Especially when you feel like you're right.
Yeah, and you feel like the other person is wrong.
But the post also talks about the importance of focusing on the issue itself.
Right.
Rather than attacking the person, which I think is a really helpful distinction.
It is, because it's about separating the problem from the individual.
Right.
So you can address the problem without making it personal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where active listening comes back in. Because if you can truly listen to what the other person is saying and try to understand their perspective, you're more likely to be able to find a resolution that works for both of you.
Right. And that's really the goal of conflict resolution.
Yes.
It's not about winning.
Right.
It's about finding a solution that benefits everyone involved.
Awesome. Okay. So we've covered communication, empathy, active listening, conflict resolution, and now we get to my favorite one.
Oh, what is it?
Adaptability.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think this one is so crucial for navigating different social situations.
It is.
And it's something that I've had to learn the hard way because I used to think that I had to be the same person in every situation.
Right.
Like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. But I realized that that wasn't really working for me. Because sometimes you need to adjust your communication style based on who you're talking to and the situation you're in.
It's like having different tools in your toolbox. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
Exactly.
So why would you use the same communication style for every situation?
Like, you wouldn't talk to your boss the same way you talk to your best friend.
Right, exactly.
Right, or your grandma.
Right.
You're not going to be like, yo, grandma, what's up? So it's about being respectful of the other person and the context of the situation.
Right. And it's also about being effective, because if you're not adapting your communication style, then your message might not be received the way you intended it to be.
Yeah, and I think this also ties back to empathy. Because if you can truly understand where the other person is coming from, you're more likely to be able to adjust your communication style in a way that resonates with them.
Absolutely.
Okay. And last but not least, we have collaboration.
Yeah, the team player skill.
So talk to us about collaboration.
So collaboration is essentially about working together effectively with other people to achieve a common goal.
So it's not just about working alongside someone.
No.
It's about actually
working together
towards a shared objective.
Right.
And I think that requires a lot of the skills that we've already talked about.
Oh, absolutely.
Like communication, empathy, active listening, conflict resolution.
It all comes into play.
Because if you're not able to communicate effectively with your team members or if you're not able to empathize with their perspectives, or if you're not able to resolve conflicts in a healthy way, then collaboration is going to be really difficult.
And it's going to be stressful.
Yes.
And it's not going to be very productive.
Right. So collaboration is really about leveraging the strengths of each individual and working together to create something that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right. And I think that's where the magic happens.
Yes.
When you can get a group of people who are all working together in sync and, really supporting each other.
And I think that's when you see the best results.
Absolutely.
Both in terms of the quality of the work and the satisfaction of the team members.
And the speed at which it gets done.
Right.
Like things just move faster.
Okay, so those are the 6 key skills that the post highlights. And I think it's a really great overview of what we should be focusing on when it comes to interpersonal skills.
Yeah, it gives you a good foundation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so now that we've covered the what, are you ready to move on to the how?
Let's do it. I'm eager to hear what practical tips we can implement.
To actually improve these skills.
Yeah, because it's one thing to talk about it.
Right.
But it's another thing to actually do it.
So let's get into the actionable steps that we can take.
Exactly. All right, so let's dive into those practical tips.
Yes, give us the goods.
All right, so the first one is to practice active listening. And it sounds kind of obvious, but they give a really tangible way to do this. They say pick one conversation each day and make a conscious effort to just be present.
I love that.
And so that could be a coworker, it could be a family member, or even, the barista who makes your coffee. Just pick one conversation and really try to tune in.
That's such a good tip because I think sometimes we get overwhelmed with trying to change everything at once. Right. But if you just focus on one conversation a day, you can really start to make progress.
And it makes it feel less daunting.
Absolutely.
You don't have to overhaul your entire communication style overnight.
Right.
Just start small.
Totally. The next tip is to seek constructive feedback, which I think is so valuable, but also can be a little scary.
Yeah.
Because none of us really want to hear that we're not doing something well.
Right. It requires vulnerability
to
open yourself up to that kind of feedback.
But I think the key here is constructive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, right.
It's not about just tearing someone down.
It's about helping them to grow.
Yeah.
And to improve.
And I think it's also important to choose the right people to ask for feedback. Because you want to make sure that they're people who you trust.
Yeah.
And who have your interests at heart.
And who are going to be honest with you.
Yes. Honesty is key.
But also kind.
Yes. Okay, so we've got practice active listening, seek constructive feedback.
The next one is learn through observation. So basically, pay attention to people who are good at communicating.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah.
Because we're surrounded by good communicators.
Absolutely.
All the time.
Right.
We just don't always pay attention.
Right.
So who are some people who you've learned from?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I've learned from so many people over the years.
Yeah.
But I think some of the best communicators I've observed are people who are really good at active listening. They're really present in the conversation.
Right.
They're really engaged, and they make the other person feel heard.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a valuable skill.
Absolutely.
And then also people who are good at storytelling. Because stories are such a powerful way to connect with people.
Yeah.
And to convey information.
And I think good storytellers are also good at reading the room. They can tell if people are engaged or if they're losing interest.
Right. And they adjust their story accordingly.
That's adaptability.
It is.
All coming together.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Okay, so we've got practice active listening, seek constructive feedback, learn through observation.
Okay, the next one is embrace empathy exercises.
Okay, this sounds interesting.
Yeah, so basically it's about taking time to really put yourself in someone else's shoes. And the post gives a great example. They say, imagine a coworker who seems unusually stressed and irritable.
Yeah.
Instead of judging them or getting annoyed, try to imagine what might be going on in their life that's causing them to feel that way.
Like maybe they're having a tough time at home, or maybe they're dealing with a health issue.
Exactly.
And we just don't know.
We don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
So it's about giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And assuming that they have a good reason for acting the way they are.
And it's also about recognizing that everyone is fighting their own battles, so we should be kind to each other.
That's so true.
And I love that. Okay, so we've got active listening, constructive feedback, observation, empathy exercises. What's next?
Oh, next one is attend workshops or read guides.
Oh, yeah.
So basically, there's a lot of resources out there to help you improve your interpersonal skills.
There are.
There's books, there's workshops, there's online courses.
And podcasts.
And podcasts, of course.
Like this one.
Exactly. So, if you're really serious about improving your skills, then there's no shortage of resources available to you.
And I think it's also worth investing in yourself in this way. Because these skills are so valuable.
They are.
They can really make a difference in your life.
Absolutely.
So, if you're thinking about taking a course or reading a book on this topic, I say go for it.
Do it.
Okay, last tip.
Be patient and persistent.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we expect to see results overnight.
Right.
But anything worth doing, it takes time.
It takes effort.
And it takes consistency.
Absolutely.
So don't get discouraged if you don't see results immediately.
Right.
Just keep practicing.
Keep learning.
And keep growing.
And celebrate the small wins.
Yes, because every little bit of progress counts.
Absolutely.
All right, so those are the 6 tips for improving your interpersonal skills.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I think they're really actionable. And I think they can make a real difference in people's lives.
All right, well, to bring all this to life, I think it would be helpful to look at a real-life example.
Yeah, let's do it, because I think sometimes it's hard to see how these skills actually play out in a real-world setting.
So the post gives a great example of a workplace scenario.
Ooh, I love workplace scenarios.
Me too.
Okay, tell me more.
All right, so picture this. There's a new team member who's really shy.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah, and they're hesitant to speak up in meetings. And so the team leader, instead of putting them on the spot or dismissing their shyness, they decide to take a more empathetic approach.
I love that.
So they start by asking gentle, open-ended questions, to try to draw the person out.
And create a safe space.
Exactly. And over time, the team leader continues to demonstrate patience and non-judgmental listening. And a genuine interest in what this team member has to say.
Yeah.
And something amazing happens.
What happened?
The shy team member starts to open up.
Wow.
And they start contributing more to meetings.
That's incredible.
It is, and it just shows you the power of
empathy
and active listening.
Yeah.
And creating that safe space for people to share.
It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's so true.
Right, and I think this example perfectly illustrates that.
It does, and it also shows you that sometimes the quietest voices have the most valuable things to say, but they need the right environment and the right support.
To feel comfortable sharing.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so now that we've seen how these skills can play out in real life, let's talk about the long-term benefits of developing these skills.
Yeah, because it's not just about feeling good in the moment. There's actual tangible benefits.
So investing in these skills.
In these skills, absolutely. So the first one is improved job performance.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a good communicator, if you're a good listener, if you can work well with others, you're naturally going to be more successful in your job.
And I think we see this all the time, right? The people who get promoted are often the people who have strong interpersonal skills.
Absolutely.
It's not always just about technical skills.
No, it's about those soft skills.
The soft skills are huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so improved job performance.
Stronger relationships.
Oh, yeah.
So this applies to both personal and professional relationships. If you can communicate effectively, if you can empathize with others, if you can resolve conflicts in a healthy way, you're going to have stronger relationships.
And that's something that we all want, right?
Of course.
Who doesn't want to have strong relationships?
Exactly.
With their loved ones and their colleagues?
Absolutely.
Okay, so improved job performance, stronger relationships.
Reduced stress.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
So when you have strong interpersonal skills, you're better equipped to handle difficult situations.
Right.
So you're less likely to get stressed out.
Because you have the tools.
You have the tools.
To navigate those challenges.
Exactly.
Okay, reduce stress. I like that one.
Enhanced reputation.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're known for being a good communicator and a good listener and someone who's easy to work with, that's going to enhance your reputation.
And I think that can open doors for you.
Absolutely.
In all areas of your life.
Yeah, people want to work with people who are pleasant to be around.
Right.
And who are effective.
Makes sense.
So yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, enhanced reputation.
And last but not least, greater overall life satisfaction.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
It is. And it makes sense when you think about it. Because when you have strong interpersonal skills, you're going to have stronger relationships.
Right.
You're going to be more successful in your career. You're going to be less stressed out.
Yeah.
So all of that contributes to greater overall life satisfaction.
I love it. Okay, so we've covered why these skills are important. We've covered the specific skills we should be focusing on.
Right.
And we've covered the practical tips for improving those skills.
Yeah.
And we've even seen how these skills can play out in real life and the long-term benefits.
Yeah. I think we covered it all.
I think so, too.
Awesome.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the next step is to take action. I think one thing that's really stood out to me is this idea of adaptability. Like, it's so easy to just think, oh, this is how I communicate, and that's it.
Totally. Yeah.
But realizing that different people respond to different approaches, I think, is huge.
Yeah, that's making me think about how sometimes we can misunderstand people's intentions based on their communication style.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, like someone might come across as really blunt
Right.
or abrasive, but actually they just communicate really directly.
Yeah, that can be hard to adjust to.
It is, especially if you're someone who's used to a more subtle communication style.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. You know, someone who's really quiet and withdrawn could actually just be processing information deeply and need more time to formulate their thoughts.
Exactly.
And we just assume that they're not interested or they don't have anything to say.
Right. And that can be really damaging to relationships.
Oh, for sure. I think this whole deep dive has really just kind of highlighted how important it is to be mindful of how we communicate and to really try to understand where other people are coming from.
It's not just about expressing ourselves, it's about understanding others as well.
Totally. And I think what I'm taking away from this is a sense of hope.
Oh, I like that.
Because it means that we're not stuck
Right.
with the communication patterns that we've developed over the years. You know, we can learn new skills.
We can evolve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can evolve and become more intentional about how we interact with others.
It's like we've been given this toolbox of skills, and now we have the power to choose which tools to use.
And I think that's really empowering.
It is.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder.
All right, let's hear it.
Think about a recent interaction you had where you felt like the communication wasn't quite right.
Yeah.
Like maybe there was a misunderstanding or you just didn't feel like you were really connecting with the other person. Now imagine approaching that same interaction with just one of the skills we've discussed today.
Right.
Active listening, empathy, adaptability, clear communication.
Yeah.
How might the outcome have been different?
That's a good question.
Right.
It makes you think.
Yeah, and it highlights how even small changes in our approach can have a ripple effect on our relationships and our lives.
I love that.
So thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into interpersonal skills.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you'll learn something new.
And we hope you'll join us next time
For another fascinating exploration.
of the human experience.
Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting.
See you later.